Hello once again, dear viewers, and welcome to a new series that I'm thinking of titling Painted Ladies. In this series, I want to paint, and while painting, I want to explore these portraits of a flapper by talking about the women, their lives, and legacies that helped create the stereotype we see today. So first off, of course, is the mother of all flappers, Miss Zelda Fitzgerald. Titled The First American Flapper, she helped create the stereotypical flapper demeanor that we see portrayed all over today. Now, Zelda Fitzgerald was born Zelda Sayre on July 24th of 1900 to Alabama Supreme Court Justice Anthony Dickinson and wife Minnie Buckner Sayre in Montgomery, Alabama. She was the youngest of 5 children and was known for being independent, high-spirited, and having a disdain for propriety. She was a talented dancer, starting ballet at a young age and continuing on into high school, which, while she was very bright, was not very Zelda loved the attention and developed an appetite for it. She would wear flesh-colored bathing suits just to fuel rumors that she swam naked. She drank, she smoked, she spent a lot of time with a lot of boys. She actually even convinced her whole class to wear a single style of dress, and then showed up that day in an opposite dress, just to stand out. And let's be honest, boys would do anything for her attention. One young man even flew a plane over her home trying to catch her eye. Though I will say her family's high status kept her shielded from social ruin, she and her childhood friend, the Hollywood star Tallulah Bankhead, were mainstays of Montgomery gossip. Her high school yearbook quote best describes her mentality. "Why should all life be work when we can borrow? Let's think only of today and not worry about tomorrow." In 1918, at a country club dance, Zelda met a dashing second lieutenant with blonde hair and bright blue eyes named Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald. F. Scott was smitten with Zelda from then on. He would regularly travel to Montgomery to see her, regale her with his plans of fame and fortune, and even gave her drafts of his first book, This Side of Paradise. He even went back and reworked one of the characters, Rosalind Connage, in the book to resemble Zelda more closely. Zelda was more than a pretty muse for her man, though. In 1919, after the end of the First World War, with the pushing of Zelda, Scott moved to New York City to solidify himself in the literary world and to get his works published. When she showed Scott her personal diary, he went as far as lifting whole passages verbatim to use in his novel. In fact, at the end of the book, This Side of Paradise, the soliloquy that the protagonist, Amory Blaine, gives in the cemetery is a direct quote pulled from Zelda's diary. This is a practice he repeats over and over. He even goes as far as sharing her diary entries with his friends, so they could also use passages as well. The couple's romantic life was rocky from the start. With Scott far away, Zelda would still go on dates with other men and keep up her active social life. Her and Scott broke up many times and reconnected over and over every time by letter or in person. Even after becoming engaged in March 1920, they broke up once more before finally coming together and marrying. All of this left Zelda's friends and family with a weary eye on the relationship, especially as they did not approve of Scott's excessive drinking, though Zelda did some as well, and his Catholic religion. Nonetheless, on March 26, 1920, This Side of Paradise was published, and by April 3rd, Zelda was in New York City getting married to Scott at St. Patrick's Cathedral. With the success of his novel and their wild behavior, the Fitzgeralds became celebrities of New York. They were kicked out of the Biltmore and Commodore hotels for public drunkenness. Scott interrupts plays with his own monologues, and Zelda even jumps into the Union Square fountain. Nonetheless, they were popular. Dorothy Parker once wrote, and I quote, "They do both look as though they have just stepped out of the sun. Their youth was striking. Everyone wanted to meet him." In 1921, Zelda gave birth to their only daughter, Frances Fitzgerald, also known as Scotty. She wasn't what you would call a naturally inclined mother. She and Scott still regularly partied, and they hired a nanny and cleaning service almost instantly to take care of Scotty. As Scott's second novel approached publication, Zelda was asked by the editor of the New York Tribune to write a review. Though it is about the decline of the flapper life, it is, as author Nancy Milford puts it, a defense of her own code of existence. In the article, Zelda describes what she believes makes a woman a flapper. Quote, "The flapper awoke from her lethargy of subdeism, bobbed her hair, put on her choicest pair of earrings and a great deal of audacity, and rouged and went into battle. She flirted because it was fun to flirt, and wore one-piece bathing suits because she had a good figure. She was conscious of the things she did were the things that she had always wanted to do. Mothers disapproved of their sons taking the flappers to dance, to tea, to swim, and most of all, to heart." The party lifestyle can only last so long, though. And as the money from their writing dried up, the Fitzgeralds moved to the French Riviera in 1924 to save money and give Scott time to work on his latest novel, The Great Gatsby, a title Zelda helped pick out herself. With a lot of free time on her hands from her husband writing, Zelda started to frequent casinos and beaches, where she met a French pilot by the name of Edouard S. Jozan. The two start an affair, and within weeks, Zelda asks for a divorce from Scott. Scott at first demanded to confront Jozan, but instead dealt with Zelda's demand for a divorce by locking her in their home until she abandoned her request. In the end, Zelda never saw Jozan again. In 1925, while in Paris, the couple meets Ernest Hemingway. While Hemingway and Scott became friends instantly, Zelda was not as impressed. She considered Hemingway's domineering macho persona to be merely a posture. Hemingway, in turn, repeatedly told Scott that Zelda was crazy. Through Hemingway, though, the Fitzgeralds were introduced to the Lost Generation expatriate community, which had people like Gertrude Stein, T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, and many more. Outwardly, the couple seemed happy. They put on a fun-loving party attitude, but behind the scenes, daily life was riddled with violent fights and self-destruction. Scott tries to sleep with a prostitute after Zelda accuses him of cheating on her with Hemingway. Zelda would hurt herself repeatedly while fighting with Scott. One story cites that she threw herself down a set of stairs because Scott was paying more attention to Isidore Duncan at a party, while another talks about her overdosing on sleeping pills after a fallout with her affair from Jozan. Zelda's only solace comes in the form of dance, painting, and writing. In 1927, Zelda retook up ballet, practicing daily, sometimes up to 8 hours a day. She showed some of her early talent from childhood. Her notoriety and hard work made her an interesting candidate for performance. In 1929, she is invited to the ballet school of the San Carlo Opera Ballet Company in Naples. However, because of Scott's unwillingness to move, their financial situation, and the gender expectations placed upon women and mothers in this era, Zelda never had the chance to create the ballet career she wanted for herself. Their party lifestyle had started to take a toll on the couple. It had started almost a decade before, but now it was worse. Between Scott's alcoholism and Zelda's erratic behavior, partying had quickly morphed from being a fashionable fun affair into a self-destruction. In 1930, Zelda was admitted to a sanatorium in France, underneath the observation of Europe's leading psychiatrist, Dr. Eugene Bühler. With that, she is diagnosed with schizophrenia. Throughout the 30s, Zelda has several stints in psychiatric clinics and hospitals. She even pins her only book, Save the Waltz for Me, inside one of them. This book has a dismal first run, and actually enrages Scott for using their marriage as material for it. Even though that's exactly what he planned to do for his next novel, Tender is the Night. Their marriage, though, already fractured, never truly recovers. Scott moves to Hollywood to write movies, while Zelda stayed in the hospital. In December of 1940, Scott dies of a heart attack at the age of 44. 8 years later, on March 10th, Zelda would also die, trapped in a fire at the Highland Hospital alongside 8 other female patients. At her death, Zelda and Scott were little more than washed-up celebrities, more famous for their antics rather than their literary careers. Critical interest in Scott didn't really form until the 1950s, and interest in Zelda took even longer. In 1970, Nancy Milford, a Columbia University graduate student, wrote Zelda, a biography, which I used for this research. The book portrays Zelda as a talented artist, crushed by gender expectations and her controlling husband, making Zelda a feminist icon. Zelda's legacy has always been her ability to inspire. From Scott's first novel to being referenced heavily in the Eagles' Witchy Woman, and even the namesake of one of video games' most iconic series, The Legend of Zelda. Zelda Fitzgerald is considered by many the mother of the flapper, with her iconic bob hair, perfect painted lips, down to her satirical wit and powerful streak for independence that defines the flapper to this day. Zelda, alongside many other women in the 1920s, would be combined together to create the portrait of a flapper. And in her own words, she sums up the mentality of the flapper best. Quote, "She refused to be bored, chiefly because she wasn't boring." Until our next historical adventure, thank you for watching.